$19,500.78. That's what I spent last year. If that's really all you wanted to know, I didn't want to make you wait 10 minutes just for that. But if you want to know how I spent less than $20,000 last year, despite living in one of the most expensive areas of the world, and how I plan to reach financial freedom at 28 years old, despite starting with $0 at 22, then I hope you'll stick around for a little while longer. And by the way, I'm not counting any income from YouTube. Because, well, what money? I really do plan to retire or at least be financially independent after just 6 years of working a 9-to-5 job. So give me just a few minutes and I'll explain exactly how I spend my money, how I spend so much less money than most people, the one expense where I actually spend way more money than the average person and why, and how I'll retire before I turn 30 with just a 9-to-5 job. But first, I need to explain something that is extremely important. Because most people who want to retire early focus on the wrong things. And that's not their fault. It's just what everyone tells them to do. Almost every financial guru I see on the internet talks about making money and picking up side hustles and building streams of passive income. All of that is way less important than you think. So before I show you how I spend my money and how I'll retire at 28, I need to explain the 26x multiplier. I'm legitimately shocked that I haven't seen anyone else talk about this. So let me show you what it is and why it's so important using a super quick example. Let's say you spend $60,000 per year. The rule of thumb will tell you that you need $1.5 million to retire. If you don't trust me, I made a whole video explaining the 4% rule in a lot more detail. So make sure to check that out for more information on this calculation. What most financial gurus will tell you is you should earn more money. If you can earn more money, then you'll reach that $1.5 million faster and you'll be financially independent. And they aren't wrong about that. If you make an extra dollar, you'll have an extra dollar. But no matter how much money you make, you will still need $1.5 million to retire as long as you spend $60,000 per year. So that's why I give completely different advice to my coaching clients. There is a much faster way to reach financial freedom. And even better, it's a lot easier. Because instead of using every spare minute to grind away at a side hustle, you could also just reduce your expenses. If you can live on $40,000 per year instead of $60,000 per year, then you would be saving an extra $20,000 per year with no extra effort. But that's not even the important part. Because how much money you need to retire depends on how much money you spend. And the rule of thumb is that you need 25 times your annual expenses before you can safely quit your job and retire. So when you reduce your expenses, you also massively reduce how much money you need to retire. By reducing your expenses from $60,000 to $40,000 per year, you would reduce how much money you need to retire by $500,000. This is what I call the 26x multiplier. When you earn an extra dollar, you have an extra dollar. But when you save an extra dollar, you have an extra dollar, and you need 25 less dollars to retire. That's why I get so frustrated when I see other finance gurus talk about increasing income. It is way more powerful to just decrease your expenses. And I know I'm spending a lot of time on this, but it is so important for you to understand before we move on. The 26x multiplier literally changed my life. And I wanted to start with this lesson because this explains why I'm living so frugally. If you really want to retire early as fast as possible, focusing on reducing your expenses is far more powerful than trying to increase your income. So now that you understand why I spend so little, let me explain what I spend my money on and how I manage to live on less than $20,000 per year. I basically sort my expenses into 6 big categories: housing, transportation, food, health, insurance, and miscellaneous. There's actually one more expense that I'm not including here, but we'll get to that later. Let's start with the biggest, which is housing. I live in an extremely expensive area. Rent for a studio apartment is over $2,000 a month, and buying a house is completely out of reach for people just starting their career like me. And housing is my biggest expense by far. And since housing is such a huge expense, finding strategies to reduce your expenses on this could easily be the difference in thousands of dollars of savings. And I'm really using just 3 strategies to save money. 1, stay away from downtown hubs. 2, avoid the expensive high-rises that you'll see on popular sites. And 3, live with roommates. I made an entire video where I go into these strategies and a few others in a lot more detail, so check that out if you're interested. Almost all of my coworkers in this area spend somewhere between $25,000 to $50,000 per year on housing. But by using these 3 strategies, I only spent $12,141 on housing last year. So just those decisions are easily saving me at least $10,000 per year. And this is even crazier than it sounds, but to see why, I need to explain the next expense category. Because while housing is the largest expense for most people, transportation is the second largest. But I refuse to spend as much money as the average person does. That's why when I moved to start my new job, the only thing I brought with me was a bicycle. This has helped me save a ton of money, but it also meant I had to be extremely picky about where I chose to live. I had 3 requirements. I had to be able to either walk or bike to my office, a grocery store, and a gym. Ideally, I would also be close to public transportation. Shockingly, I was able to find that. I'm within less than half a mile of both a gym and a grocery store, and my office is just 2 miles away, which is an easy bike ride. And even better, I am right next to a bus stop, which is nice on the rare occasion that I need to go somewhere a little further. Living closer to a subway would have been even more convenient, but all of those are in downtown city hubs, which are extremely expensive. Living close to a bus line is almost just as convenient, but it is a lot cheaper. Not counting the 2 plane trips I took last year, I only spent $178.60 on transportation last year. Those plane trips took the total to $1,097 last year, which is still way less than the $8,700 that the average single American spends on transportation every year. So by living without a car, I'm saving about $8,000 per year. But there's a hidden cost that I haven't talked about yet. While I'm saving a ton of money on housing and on transportation, my closest grocery store is a Trader Joe's, and that is not cheap. But despite my only option being an expensive grocery store, I've still found a few ways to save thousands of dollars per year on food. The obvious way to save is to not eat out. Eating out costs at least 6 times more than a meal that I could prepare at home. But that's not the only way to save money. If you actually take the time to compare prices at a grocery store, you'll see that there are almost always cheaper substitutes for everything you eat. And when you eat things as cheap as rice and eggs, it is incredibly easy to save thousands of dollars per year. And last year, I only spent $1,883.94 on food, while the average single American like me spent $6,547. That's an enormous difference, even though I only shop at an expensive grocery store. It honestly just blows my mind how much money people spend on food. This is probably the easiest way to save a lot more money for most people. But there are some things that I actually do spend a lot of money on, including this next expense. Because while financial freedom is really important to me, it's not more important than my health. And it really doesn't cost a lot of money to stay reasonably healthy. But I do happen to be a competitive kickboxer in my spare time, which is why I might sometimes have a black eye in a video. And that training is also extremely expensive, which is why I spent $2,334.63 just on fitness last year. This is pretty much the only thing I splurge on, and again, most people should not be spending that much money on fitness. But I don't want to hide my biggest expenses just to seem super frugal. I want to be completely transparent about where I spend my money. And this next expense is pretty low right now, but it could become one of my biggest expenses if I do decide to retire early. And that's because health insurance in America is extremely expensive. Right now, my company pays for most of my health insurance, which is why I only spent $1,456 last year on this. And since I don't own a house or a car, this is the only insurance I pay for. But in retirement, this could become a big problem. I'm sure I'll talk more about this in a later video. And lastly, we have the miscellaneous category. This is clothes, gifts, things for my apartments, and other things that just don't deserve their own expense category. Last year, I was able to keep this to just $588.21. And that's why my total expenses last year were just $19,500.78. That's less than half what the average single American spends, even though I live in an area that is twice as expensive as the national average. Except that's not really the full story. There is just one more expense that I haven't talked about yet, which is this YouTube channel. Last year, I spent $525.36 on this YouTube channel and my newsletter, even though I didn't earn anything from it. And I never started this channel expecting it to make me a millionaire. Learning about financial freedom literally changed my life, and I make these videos to pass on those lessons. So I will always share everything I know for absolutely free. But it would mean a ton if you would smash the like button or the subscribe button, or just share this video with somebody else who might benefit from learning about financial freedom. And by now, you can probably see how I'll be able to retire before I turn 30 years old. Since I spend so little, I don't need much to retire. I'm using the 26x multiplier to my advantage. I'm saving over 70% of my income every year, and I'll only need about $500,000 to retire early. I'm actually on track to hit that at just 28 years old. But that really does depend on the stock market, which is totally out of my control. And in reality, I will probably save up more than $500,000 before I seriously consider quitting my job. And I'll probably earn some extra money on the side, whether from this YouTube channel or from my financial coaching. But even if I don't, I still think I'll be able to retire before I turn 30 years old with just the income from a 9-to-5 job. Early retirement is absolutely possible. But look, I've talked a lot in this video about spending less money and not buying things. But the truth is, if you want to retire early, there are some things that you absolutely should buy. So I made an entire video on that topic, where I'll explain 10 things that you should absolutely buy if you want to reach financial freedom. You can check out that video right here. It's definitely worth your time.